Welcome to Cheating Tales Diary. Before we dive into today's story, we have a humble request. Please consider subscribing to this new channel. Help us hit our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Your support will motivate us to keep bringing you more exclusive original cheating wife stories. And now let's get started with today's story. Raindrops slid down the glass like time trying to erase itself. From the heights of a sleek Seattle penthouse, Russell Harmon looked out, not at the city lights or the skyline, but at a wound that never healed. It had only dried, and now it had started to seep again, deep inside. Russell Harmon, a name respected in the world of American architecture. But no one could see the cracks beneath the foundation of that name, forged through pain. He was now 52, with salt in his hair and steel still burning in his eyes. He carried not just responsibility, but betrayal, deception, and the weight of an unfinished conspiracy. It had been 6 years since his world collapsed in a single quiet blow. His wife Vanessa, the woman he had shared 20 years with, and Lawrence Paxton, his most trusted partner, had both stabbed him in the back. But Russell didn't fall. He bent, but he didn't break. That very day, he began sketching a new blueprint. Not for a building, but for revenge. He was no longer just an architect. He had become a hunter, a man who knew how to wait. And now, that hunter's gaze was fixed on someone else too. His son, Nathaniel. His only heir. His blood. Nathaniel, now 22, was a smart, soon-to-be college graduate, but tangled inside. He still lived with Vanessa, still called Lawrence stepdad, and every time he smiled and said, "I'm proud of you, Dad," a knife twisted in Russell's chest. But Russell never blamed him, never let go of him. He quietly watched over Nathaniel, tracking his social media analytics, travel logs, and metadata from his messages. There was no tracker on his phone, but every Friday, a full image of his laptop backed up to a secure server, at a location only Russell knew. His assistant, Dominic, a former NSA analyst, now his personal cybersecurity consultant, still sent reports every 2 days. Today's report had something new. Graduation invitation delivered to father. Map link triggered on open traffic analytics. GPS ping matches Paxton's residence. Russell closed the email. A faint smile crossed his lips. He knew. This wasn't just an invitation. It was bait. Maybe Vanessa's, maybe Lawrence's. Maybe both. Or maybe Nathaniel was just the pawn, and his innocence was being used again to set the board. But this time, Russell was ready. That night, inside his private screening room, he called in his head of security, Dominic, and Julia, his field intelligence agent. On the projection screen appeared the lake house floor plan. GPS blips, camera views, shade timing, everything was mapped out. This was the same venue where the graduation party would take place. "They want me there," Russell said, "and I will go. But I won't go alone. I'll bring everyone who stood with me, and those who stood against them." Julia cautioned, "Sir, this could be a hit." Russell's voice was quiet. "Then we turn it into an operation. Operation Mirror Stage." Dominic asked, "Confirming. Do we count Nathaniel in or keep him out?" Russell paused. "We don't bring him in yet. Not until he sees for himself who his mother and Lawrence really are. But we'll protect him, no matter what." Later that night, Russell met privately with an old friend, Judge Anthony Gray. Retired now, but still influential behind closed doors. Their conversation went late into the night. When Russell emerged, his face was calm, but in his stride, the quiet churn of a storm gathering below the surface. 3 days later, Russell received a video call from Nathaniel. Behind the camera, Vanessa. Her voice was soft, trembling. "Russell, I know we've had our past, but Nathaniel wants you there. Please, for him." Russell looked into her eyes. He saw deceit. He saw fear. But above all, he saw intention. "I'll come," he said, "but not for you, just for my son." The call ended. But during the conversation, Russell's team had already activated a visual analysis script. In the reflection behind Nathaniel, they saw a shadow. Diaz, the same former special ops agent involved in the oil lobby witness disappearance just weeks ago. And now, for Russell, this wasn't just personal anymore. It was lethal. Inside the penthouse, Russell stood before the large sketchboard mounted to the wall. He began to draw a new plan, a full layout of the graduation party. Camera angles in the hall, exit points, covered movement routes toward the boathouse, and predicted patterns of Lawrence's steps. Every line he drew reminded him of the day he first dreamed of becoming an architect. But today's blueprint wasn't for a building. It was for a storm. There was a day, 6 years ago, that still burned in Russell's memory like a bitter sun that rose every morning, uninvited. He had been returning from a client meeting in the private wing of his architecture firm, holding a cold brew in one hand, the day's fatigue lightly pressing on his shoulders. But as he opened the door to the conference room, his steps froze. Spread across the large design table were the blueprints for his confidential project, Eco Resort Maui. And Lawrence's hands were on them. Vanessa's eyes were locked on the sketches. They weren't standing behind his back. They were inside his dreams. "Interesting curves on this one," Lawrence said casually, as if unaware he was stealing. Russell didn't say a word. He stood at the door, just watching, taking it all in. His wife, the same woman who once said, "I'll build your dreams with you, brick by brick," was now offering those very dreams, wrapped in blueprints, to someone else's ambition. Vanessa looked at him. Her eyes carried no shame, only a smile. Cold, triumphant. "Russell, it's not what you think." But he knew. It was exactly what he thought. And maybe worse. That evening, Russell didn't scream. He didn't cry. He walked straight into his workshop, the one place he went to be alone, surrounded by the smell of stone, wood, and dust. And that's where he activated his network. His first call, the law firm of Grayson and Bell. "Prepare the divorce papers," he said. "But don't rush it. I want them to make the first move." He learned later that Vanessa and Lawrence's affair had been going on for 3 years. Lawrence, once his partner, had risen in political circles, now brushing shoulders with Washington's governor. He had become the face of eco-sustainable development. Vanessa had carved her own private game behind that power. The divorce filing came a year later, laced with false accusations, emotional cruelty, neglect, and betrayal. Headlines read, "Vanessa Harmon files for divorce, alleges manipulation and exploitation." Russell gave no press statement. In court, he simply told his lawyers, "Their lies have deep roots. We won't fight them with noise. We'll water their roots quietly and then cut them down." The court battle dragged on for 2 long years. Vanessa submitted falsified financial documents, messages, and fabricated screenshots of emotional abuse. Lawrence backed her from the shadows, leveraging connections in the governor's office. But Russell stayed silent, building a strategy of his own. He hired Hale and Curran Investigative Services, a private intelligence firm that only worked with high-profile clients. They gathered 3 years' worth of chats between Vanessa and Lawrence, location histories, hotel billings, and time-stamped spa retreats. All legally obtained, all admissible in court. But Russell never submitted the evidence. He kept it alive, waiting for the right moment. Why? Because even after losing in court, he wanted Vanessa and Lawrence to believe they'd won, so they'd grow reckless and make mistakes he could use later. Eventually, the court awarded Vanessa 48% of the total estate, including 3 commercial buildings, a stake in a long-term development project, and a farmhouse in Washington state. Russell signed the papers. No objection, no resistance. That same day, Operation Reconstruction began. Back in the present, same Seattle penthouse, same silence. Russell opened an old notebook, written shortly after the divorce. On the first page, in bold letters, it read, "They destroyed my name. I will erase their empire." Vanessa and Lawrence were now together, married. On social media, they appeared as a polished power couple. Green revolutionaries, urban redevelopment visionaries, Washington's eco-icons. But behind the curtain, Lawrence's team was quietly acquiring the same land Vanessa had been awarded in the divorce. Their plans? Hotels, resorts, casino-fed traffic hubs, greenwashing in full swing. Russell knew everything, and he knew. The answer couldn't come through hammers and headlines. It had to come like sugar stirred into tea. Slow, quiet, poisonous. First, he bought back the farmhouse, using a front company called Bluewood Wellness. Then, he approached Lawrence's company's IT head with a $700,000 offer. The man accepted. Now Russell had access to construction renderings, internal documents, land deals, every dirty plan. He knew the graduation party wasn't just a celebration. It was a cover. Something bigger was coming. Maybe not just emotional, maybe physical. And that threat? It sparked something inside Russell, something that had long turned to ash. Now it burned again. His mission was clear. Pull Nathaniel out of the lie his mother had wrapped him in. And the first step was the invitation. Which wasn't just a card, it was a tracker. The card in Nathaniel Harmon's hand looked innocent, wrapped in pride and sentiment. Gold-embossed letters read, "To the man who taught me strength in silence, please join me as I graduate." At the bottom, a QR code. It linked to an RSVP form and a digital map. Russell scanned the card, and instantly, something felt off. He didn't react. Instead, he took the card to his office scanner. The moment the QR code was activated, an invisible digital ping went live on his system. It was embedded with an extra script, a geofencing tracker. It would record device travel history through IP matching, without Nathaniel ever knowing. Russell's team, especially Dominic, moved fast. "Sir, it's a location beacon. Once scanned, it tracks nearby device behavior for the next 72 hours. Most likely deployed by a third-party tracker, could be tied to a DC-based political campaign network." Russell looked at the card again. Not like a message, but like a weapon. "Nathaniel has no idea," he said. He still believes his mother is telling him the truth. Over the past few months, Nathaniel had tried to meet his father several times. But each time, he seemed emotionally conflicted. There was a quiet tug of war written all over his face. On one side, his mother's stories. On the other, his father's silence. But that was about to change. Russell had made a plan. He would attend the party, but not as himself. He'd go in as a quiet eye, a walking camera, and with him, a high-alert security protocol, Black Circle. Black Circle was something Russell had designed back when Lawrence's lobbying activity first came under suspicion. It included a network of live-stream cameras, wireless microphone transmitters, drone-based surveillance, and 2 undercover agents posing as ordinary guests at the party. But more than all that, the priority was Nathaniel's safety. Russell knew, if they were going this far to lure him in, then Nathaniel might be nothing more than a pawn in a much bigger play. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was growing uneasy. One night he overheard his mother arguing with Lawrence, the tension sharp, the voices not meant for him. "If he shows up, we won't need Diaz, understood?" "And if he doesn't," Lawrence snapped, "then we make a statement. Either way, his silence ends that night." Nathaniel's breathing quickened. He had heard the name Diaz before. A shadowy figure who popped up on Lawrence's phone more than once, but never in person. That same night, he opened his laptop and dug through old emails, logs, and cloud files. But something was off. Folders were missing. Others were strangely duplicated. And most alarming, his calendar had updated itself. Automatically, without his input. The next day, Nathaniel called his father. The call started normally. "Hey, Dad, did you get the card?" "Yeah, son, I did." A moment of silence. "Are you coming?" "I am, but do you have something you want to tell me?" Nathaniel inhaled sharply, ready to speak. But then Vanessa's voice rang out from behind him. "Nathan, your meeting's about to start." The call disconnected. Russell stared at the phone for a moment, then called Julia, his right-hand security officer. "He's not safe." That same evening, Russell had Nathaniel brought to a mall under the pretext of a security test. He knew the phones weren't safe anymore, too many ears on the line. So, for this reunion, Russell had an entire surveillance van modified, soundproofed, satellite blind, and equipped with a full live monitoring system. As Nathaniel stepped out of the mall's bookstore, two volunteers approached him with what looked like a graduation gift, a box containing a tiny drone camera and a fully encrypted smartwatch. Seconds later, two men walked up, dressed as Oceanside media reporters. But they weren't reporters. They were members of Russell's team. "Mr. Nathaniel, your father is requesting a private conversation. We assure your complete safety. You can say no, but we ask you to hear him out, just once." Nathaniel hesitated. Then slowly, he took the box and walked toward the van. Inside, Russell was already waiting, but he didn't rush in for an embrace. "How are you?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. Nathaniel stayed quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, quietly, uncertainly. "Dad, was I ever really just your son? Or have I always been part of some bigger game?" Russell looked into his eyes, and for the first time, he saw the fracture. That space between belief and doubt. "You've always been my son. You still are. And you always will be. But now it's time for you to see the truth. The truth I never showed you because I was still trying to protect your mother." He tapped a screen beside them. On it, videos began to play. Recordings of Lawrence and Vanessa. File transfer logs. Tracker activity reports. Financial trails. Nathaniel stared. Silent, shaken, like a glass that hadn't shattered, but was beginning to crack from within. "I never knew," he said, barely above a whisper. "I just believed what she told me. That you left us." "I never left you, son. I was pushed out. But now I want you to decide for yourself whose son you want to be, a son of lies or of truth." Tears welled up in Nathaniel's eyes. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was curiosity, and maybe anger. The party was still a few days away. But Nathaniel? He was no longer just a graduate. He was a witness now, and maybe a warrior. Cities sleep at night. But in the corridors of power and politics, night is when the real noise begins. And that very night, behind a locked door in an old Washington, D.C. clubhouse, 3 people sat around a table. Lawrence Paxton, Vanessa Harmon, and a shadow. A man whose name was never said aloud. But everyone knew him inside that room. Diaz, a former special ops agent, Afghanistan, Syria, then a long stretch in Latin America. Officially, retired. In truth, he was a contract killer known for 3 things: clean hits, silence, and leaving no witnesses. Spread across the table was a map. Rockmere Lake House grounds, the exact location of Nathaniel's graduation party. Lawrence leaned in. "He'll come. He always walks into traps. Proud men do." Vanessa's voice didn't waver. No fatigue, just ice. Just make sure he doesn't walk out. And remember, not a single scratch on Nathaniel. Diaz pointed to the map. The boathouse is isolated. Wooden walls, bad lighting. No one will hear a thing. We take him out after the speech. I already placed a backup exit. Northwest Woods, old trail. Payment? He asked. Lawrence slid an envelope across the table, with Bitcoin transfer details and a wired emergency amount. Diaz didn't smile. He just nodded once and left, without looking back. That same night, back in Seattle, Russell Harmon sat inside his war room. 7 monitors glowed in front of Julia, each streaming live feeds from across the city. One showed the exterior of the DC club, capturing Diaz as he exited. Another tracked Lawrence's car via GPS. A third displayed encrypted phone traffic between Lawrence and Vanessa. Dominic leaned forward. "Sir, we've confirmed it. His name is Diaz. Hector Diaz. Real name, Marcus Hector de la Cruz. Former Greenlight Unit. Record sealed since 2014. Russell closed his eyes, took a long breath. Follow him like a shadow. Every move, every step. This isn't just a hit. It's a statement. And I won't let it go unanswered." 2 days later, Diaz arrived at Rockmere Lake House, dressed in the uniform of a speaker setup company. To the staff, he was just part of the sound team. But inside his bag, there were no microphones. Just a silenced weapon, a foldable rifle, and a compressed oxygen inhaler. A mask designed to fool any emergency counteragent. Unbeknownst to him, Russell's team was already on site. Across the lake, inside what looked like a quiet fishing cabin, sat former intelligence officers, scanning every radio frequency, every mic relay, every movement pattern around the estate. So why had Vanessa taken such a huge risk? Because Lawrence could no longer escape Russell's shadow. He feared a public takedown, the humiliation of being exposed. Vanessa, though, she didn't fear him. She hated him. She once said, "Russell never hit me, but he imprisoned me in silence. He made me feel invisible, and now I'll erase him." What she forgot was, men like Russell don't destroy with noise. They destroy in silence. A day before the party, Nathaniel received a secret message from a close friend. "Don't let your mother take you to the cabin again. Something's off." He showed the message to his father, who was reviewing surveillance feeds inside the van. Russell looked at the screen, then at his son. "You're not confused anymore, son. You're awake, and now, you're not standing on my side. You're standing on the side of truth." The night before the graduation party, exactly 24 hours out, Russell activated the final stage of his operation. Phase 2. Crowd Ghost. He turned to Julia. "We're in warfare mode now. Every guest will be facially scanned. The hidden ones, our undercover agents will escort them in with cam gear. We'll record everything. Every smile, every fake hug, every whispered conspiracy." Elsewhere, Diaz received his final instructions. He arrives at 8:20. Speech by 8:45. Strike between 8:47 and 8:50. But Diaz had no idea that by now it wasn't just guests around him. Every corner hid a camera. Every whisper carried a microphone. Russell was ready to step into the light. On the outskirts of town, the mall was quiet. Graduation weekend hadn't stirred up much traffic yet. But for Russell Harmon's security team, it had already become an operational zone. Julia and Dominic had planted discreet cameras across the floor. Encrypted communication channels were active. 2 agents in plain clothes patrolled every entrance. Calling Nathaniel here wasn't easy, but there was no time left. The party was underway. And Diaz was no longer just a suspicion. He was a confirmed threat. Russell had made a decision. He wouldn't keep his son in the dark anymore. Not just evidence. Tonight, he'd give Nathaniel the truth. Face to face. Not through another's words, but from a father's soul. 6 p.m. Nathaniel's steps slowed as he entered the mall. Collar popped, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. He looked like any other young man, but his walk held weight. The kind of weight that came from not knowing which version of your life was true. He called his father. The moment the line connected, Operation Father's Fortress went live. "Dad, I'm here." "Good." Russell's voice came calmly from the other side. "Now turn left. There's a woman in a red scarf. She's part of my team. Behind her is a toy store. Walk inside." Nathaniel didn't understand what was happening, but he didn't panic. He didn't turn back. He let instinct, or maybe something deeper, carry him forward. Inside the toy store, behind a false wall, was a private surveillance van. As soon as Nathaniel stepped through the hidden door, the security lock engaged automatically. The lights inside rose slowly. A table stood ahead, and across from it sat his father. But this wasn't the Russell he remembered. This was a man with 6 years of truth in his eyes. 6 years of silence, of pain, of purpose. His back was straight, his palms open, like a man not on trial, but one ready to surrender, to his son. "You remember when you were a kid?" Russell said softly. "When I was teaching you to swim, I threw you into the deep once. You panicked, but you kicked your way up. I'm not here to throw you in again. I'm here to hold out my hand." Nathaniel sat down slowly. His eyes welled with tears, but he didn't speak. Russell slid a folder toward him. Inside were email chains between Vanessa and Lawrence, digital payment logs, Diaz's background, and screenshots, showing Nathaniel's name labeled clearly as bait. Nathaniel flipped through each page. His hands trembled. I didn't know. Mom told me you left us, that you were with someone else." Russell didn't interrupt. He let his son speak, every word, every tear, every broken piece of trust. "She said you'd judge me if I accepted Lawrence." Russell's voice remained steady, but inside, it cracked like a father torn from his child. "I never left you. I protected you, even from the one who wore love like a mask and used you as a weapon." Nathaniel was still shaking. "Can I still change things, Dad?" Russell met his gaze. "If you're asking me that right now, son, then you already have. You're not just my son anymore. You're part of this fight." And for the first time, Russell decided to take Nathaniel into the heart of his real world, into the operation hub known as Black Foundation. The van had already left Seattle, heading into the hills, toward a building that from the outside looked like nothing more than an abandoned farmhouse. But underground, it was a fortress. As Nathaniel descended the stairs, the walls lit up with screens, surveillance panels, and intel dashboards. This wasn't a movie set. This was 6 years of his father's war. Every screen displayed something different. Live tracking of the party, movement mapping of Diaz, recorded clips of Lawrence's conversations with the governor, and wire transfers linked to Vanessa. And it was all laid bare before Nathaniel. "You thought I'd judge you," Russell said, "but I only wanted you to see for yourself, the face behind the mask." That night, for the first time, Nathaniel didn't just see his father as a man. He saw him as a warrior, and himself, not just as a son, but as a witness, a fighter, and maybe an heir. One day before the party, final preparations were underway at the Rockmere Lake House. Colorful lights, catering crews, backdrops, and a small projector by the stage. Everything looked like a picture-perfect graduation event. But beneath the surface, a war was brewing. Vanessa and Lawrence didn't plan this event for Nathaniel. It was a stage show, a public performance, a chance to present family unity, redemption, and second chances for the cameras. What they didn't realize was that Russell wasn't just part of the show anymore. He was directing it. Russell activated a new protocol. Operation Ghosts of the Past. He turned to Julia and Dominic. It's time for their past to stand right in front of them, one shadow at a time. They compiled a list of 14 people. Each one had been ruined by Vanessa and Lawrence's greed, manipulation, or political games. Alan Gregory, the whistleblower at Lawrence's company, falsely accused of fraud and sent to prison. Marion Tobin, Vanessa's former co-writer, whose book draft was stolen and rebranded into Vanessa's bestseller. Jose Hernandez, a laborer whose land was taken under the pretense of building a sustainable resort. And others, who had only tears. But now, had a moment. Each of them was invited under false names and identities. Exclusive media event, the invitations read. They were given clothing embedded with camera buttons, mini microphones sewn into their lapels, and the most important instruction: say nothing, just show up and record everything. On the evening of the party, they arrived, one by one. Some came disguised as camera crew, some as former professors, others as long-lost family friends. Everything was moving exactly according to plan. Vanessa and Lawrence stood on stage, all smiles. Media teams were being directed where to focus, especially on the warm moment between mother and son. Look at Nathaniel standing with his mother, a true American family, one reporter whispered. But among the crowd, behind those lenses, the real witnesses had taken their positions. The cameras weren't just capturing smiles. They were catching fear and unraveling the lies. Just behind the stage, Lawrence was chatting with a reporter when he accidentally bumped into a woman. "Excuse me," he said. She smiled. "I remember when you told me my voice was too regional for publishing. Guess who got her story printed now?" Lawrence's smile faltered. He was about to say something, but she walked away. The camera was rolling the entire time. Across the room, Alan Gregory struck up a quiet conversation with a security guard. "Remember me?" he asked. "You used to work the elevator at Thornton Plaza in 19, right? I was the guy being escorted out after testifying against Paxton's numbers." The guard stiffened, but Alan simply smiled and walked off. The moment caught on film. Nathaniel stood by the stage, no longer just attending. Now, he was part of the mission. He recognized the faces. He tracked every whisper. He watched every fake smile and every unspoken threat. He saw Vanessa leaning in again and again, whispering into Lawrence's ear. He noticed Diaz sitting silently near the fireplace. He caught how every waiter was under watch, how every move was monitored. This wasn't a party. It was a hunting ground, where every guest wore a mask, and every mask hid a weapon. Then, right at 7:35 p.m., a voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the speeches, please enjoy the special AV montage prepared for tonight." The screen lit up, starting with some casual snapshots. Sweet moments from childhood, family photos, simple memories. Then the screen went black. And the next slide? Diaz's face. Then, an audio clip played. "He dies after the speech. No blood on us. No trace. If Russell suspects, Nathaniel's our shield." The crowd froze. The screen faded to black again. And at that exact moment, every ghost guest in the room, wearing their hidden gear, had their cameras automatically activate. A live stream began, directly uploading to FBI servers and major media outlets. Sweat rolled down Vanessa's temple. Lawrence shouted something, angry and panicked. But it was too late. This wasn't a party anymore. It had become a courtroom. And the ghosts. They had stepped into the spotlight. A gentle breeze moved across the lake. Reflections danced on the water's surface. Inside the Rockmere Lake House, guests sat still. Some quietly asking for water, some walking toward the restroom, others just sitting with their heads down like they'd just witnessed a wedding fall apart in front of their eyes. But the real act That was still to come. Lawrence Paxton, who moments ago was preparing to walk on stage, now paced restlessly behind a closed door. Vanessa was on the phone, desperately trying to reach Diaz. No response. "Where the hell is he?" she snapped. "I told you to get rid of Diaz," Lawrence muttered. "No," Vanessa snapped back. "I told you Diaz was just the contingency. But you pulled the same old play again, using a son as a shield in a war between men." Tension rose between them. And then the door creaked open. Diaz stood there, calm, steady. But something in his eyes had shifted. The cold precision was still there. But now it felt personal. He picked up his bag. "We need to talk, now." Across the lake, in the old boathouse, FBI and EPA task force agents had assembled. Russell stood at the center. Calm, composed, dressed in a Navy suit, but there was no hesitation in his posture now. He looked at a monitor displaying the transcript of the conversation between Lawrence and Diaz. "This time," Russell said, "we don't roll the cameras, we roll the charges." Julia leaned in. "We have authorization. Agents are ready, waiting on your go." Russell nodded. "Make the call." At 8:43 p.m., the lights returned to the stage, and Nathaniel was handed the microphone. He looked out at the crowd. No fear in his eyes now, only conviction. The kind of voice that isn't passed down by blood, but carved by truth. "Good evening," he said. "I know you all came here to celebrate my graduation, but tonight, I'm not just accepting a degree. I'm reclaiming a life." Murmurs spread through the audience. My father, the man I still had so much to learn from, was cut out of my life with a lie, and I grew up inside that lie. But not anymore. His eyes found Vanessa and Lawrence in the crowd. "What you gave me in the name of protection was actually a mask. But that mask, it's come off now." Just then, sirens rang out from the lakefront. 4 FBI vehicles, 2 EPA vans, 2 satellite media trucks. Flashlights swept through the trees. Snipers on the boathouse roof took position. The crowd erupted in confusion. Lawrence tried to slip away, but 2 agents were already watching his every move. Vanessa reached quietly into her purse, but her hand was stopped. And then, Diaz stepped away from the crowd. Calm, straight-backed. He walked up to the FBI agents and placed his bag on the ground. "Everything's in there," he said. "Documents, weapons, and proof of contract." The FBI agent asked, "Why now?" For the first time, Diaz's voice sounded human. "Because I wasn't hired to kill a boy who just found his father." Through the crowd, Russell stepped forward, his pace firm and unwavering. He walked straight to Nathaniel. No words were exchanged, just a nod, and a father's hand gently resting on his son's back. As they stepped down from the stage, Vanessa's eyes locked with Russell's. "You planned all this for 6 years?" Russell leaned in and whispered, "A real predator is the one who lets the world believe he's prey. You gave me that power by mistaking my silence for weakness." Lawrence and Diaz were already in handcuffs. Diaz surrendered without resistance. Lawrence shouted wildly, "You can't do this. I know senators. I have friends." Russell just smiled. "You don't have friends anymore. You have witnesses." The crowd had mostly scattered, but the cameras, the recordings, and the living testimony all belonged to Russell now. He took the mic one final time. "Tonight was supposed to be about my son, and it still is. But something else ended on this stage too. False honor, fake family. Now only the truth will remain, and anyone who stands against it, Ian, will be erased. From maps, from headlines, from history." After the dramatic arrests at Rockmere Lake House, the media headlines shifted overnight. Paxton conspiracy busted live on camera. Architect's ex-wife implicated in murder plot. And the most viral of all, son exposes mother's betrayal at graduation party. But the story didn't end there. Vanessa Harmon hadn't yet been fully caught in the legal trap. Despite Diaz's confession and Lawrence's arrest, Vanessa's lawyers delayed her detainment by claiming mental instability and emotional trauma. Russell knew better. She wouldn't surrender so easily. And he was right. 3 days later, near an underpass outside Seattle, 2 men shoved a young woman into a van. Her name was Simone, Nathaniel's private security officer and a trained member of Russell's operations team. She was the one who had tracked Diaz, the one who kept Nathaniel safe during the graduation party. Exactly 45 minutes after her abduction, Russell's phone lit up. A satellite bounce call. Caller ID, unknown. But the voice? Unmistakable. I never wanted this war, Russell. But you left me no choice. Vanessa's voice wasn't emotional. It was cold, calculated, machine-like. I have the girl, and your son. You remember the cabin, don't you? Russell's eyes sharpened. His hand reached slowly toward an old map on his desk. The same cabin where I taught him to swim. Vanessa's laugh echoed over the line. Fitting, isn't it? Where you taught him to survive. I'll test what he's learned. The call ended. Russell went on high alert. A private helicopter was prepped within the hour. Only 3 people were on board. Russell, Julia, and a silent sniper named Mac. 90 miles north of Seattle, the old wooden cabin waited. It once stood beside a peaceful lake, the place where Russell had taught Nathaniel to float, to trust the water. Now it was no longer a sanctuary. It was a hunting ground. Inside the cabin, Nathaniel sat tied to a chair. There was a bruise on his face, but his lips weren't swollen. They were firm. Simone lay nearby on the floor, blindfolded but listening. Vanessa's screams echoed through the room. You humiliated me, my image, my life, my power. She threw photos against the wall, pictures of Russell, court papers, and screenshots from the graduation party. Your father always took everything in silence. But I won't stay quiet anymore. For the first time, Nathaniel looked straight at her. Mom, if you wanted someone to take your side, you should have come with the truth. What you're doing right now, no mother should ever do. Vanessa paused. She slowly walked toward him, placed her hand on his face, but it felt more like a slap. I saved you from the man you now worship like a god. He never knew how to love. Nathaniel replied softly, and you knew exactly how to turn love into fear. Suddenly, there was a faint shuffle outside. Sniper Mac locked in his position through the cabin window. Russell and Julia slipped in from the back. The air inside wasn't filled with gunpowder, but it reeked of sweat and madness. As Julia slowly pushed the door open, Vanessa raised the gun and pointed it at Nathaniel. One step closer and I'll end him right here. Russell stepped forward, hands raised. Don't, Vanessa. Look at me. Just me. His voice was cold, like ice cracking under pressure. No court, no judge, just you and me, without the masks. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but her hand didn't tremble. I loved you, Russell, but you never made space for me. Only your buildings. Russell's voice was calm, almost mournful. I built you a temple, and you turned it into a casino. At that exact moment, Nathaniel shoved his chair backward. The crash broke Vanessa's focus. Russell lunged forward and grabbed her wrist. The gun fell to the floor. But what happened next? No one saw coming. Simone tore off her blindfold and rushed to Nathaniel, cutting his restraints. Vanessa scrambled for the gun again. But this time, Nathaniel stepped in front of her. Enough, Mom. And he pulled the trigger himself. The bullet struck Vanessa in the shoulder. She screamed and collapsed. Silence. Police and EMTs arrived within minutes. Vanessa was alive, but barely. Bleeding, broken, and mentally shattered. As paramedics wheeled her out, she looked at Nathaniel one last time. "You left me too." Nathaniel's voice was soft, resolute. "No, Mom. You left yourself a long time ago. I just walked away from what was left." 3 months passed. Winter returned to Seattle, not to revisit the cracks, but to cool the new foundation. Rockmere Lake sat still, as if nothing had ever happened there. Diaz was in prison, a plea deal struck in exchange for federal testimony. He'd been relocated, off the grid. Lawrence Paxton had been sentenced to 26 years. Federal corruption, conspiracy to commit murder and land fraud. He showed no remorse during trial. But when the final sentence was read, his eyes dropped for the first time. And Vanessa? The court reached a different verdict for her. Declared mentally unstable, she wasn't sent to prison, but to a federal psychiatric rehabilitation facility. When they wheeled her into the courtroom, her hair was disheveled, her face pale, her eyes vacant. Russell was there, standing quietly in the back row. He didn't say a word. He just watched. The same Vanessa who once filled his life with color and design had crumbled into a ruin. Nathaniel never came to court. "For me," he said, "my mother will always be the woman who tucked me in at night. That's the last version of her I want to remember." Russell and Nathaniel moved forward, together. They launched the Oceanside Research and Sustainable Housing Project, on the very land Lawrence once seized to build a corrupt resort. Now that soil would hold trees, clean water labs, and sustainable housing test sites. It wasn't just a community initiative. It was redemption, for a father and a son. Every morning at 7, Russell walked the site. Sometimes, he'd just stand there, staring at the lake where he once taught Nathaniel how to swim. And once again, he was learning how to breathe. Nathaniel was now pursuing his PhD in sustainable urban design. His research paper was published by Harvard. Its opening line read, "My father taught me how to build, not just structures, but trust." He was no longer just a son. He was a legacy, and a builder of something new. One evening, as the sun melted into the water, Russell and Nathaniel sat quietly on the wooden deck of their project site. "Dad," Nathaniel asked, "do you think you'll ever forgive them?" Russell paused, then softly replied, "I didn't forgive them, but I don't remember them either. Forgiveness isn't more important than forgetting. Sometimes forgetting is the real freedom." Nathaniel nodded. "And you?" he asked. Russell looked out over the water. No more storms, just stillness. "I'm not building structures anymore, son. I'm building a legacy, and you're the first stone." A bird cried in the distance, and the two men smiled in silence. The storm hadn't vanished. It had simply gone quiet, and that silence had become the strongest foundation of all. The end.